Maybe we'll go ahead and get this evening started. And I think we can expect folks to be joining us as they can. But just looking around the room, I want to extend a really heartfelt welcome to each one of you. Thank you again for being here. And um, this is in some ways part two of an event or a commemoration that we started yesterday in honor of Paulo Freire. Um, as many of you already know, this year is the centenary of Freire's birth, and here in the School of Education, we've especially been kind of moved by the fact that in the early 1980s, I think it's 1983 to be specific, our then faculty member who joined us last time, Dr. Alma Florada, was key in inviting Paulo Freire to visit USF. And Dr. Florada might have additional stories to tell of that moment, but we were all very moved to hear that, the room in which Freire was invited up on Lone Mountain, for those of you who know USF, was packed with students from the School of Education and from the university, and that everyone was so just engaged and absorbed by Freire's ideas and words, which back then were certainly revolutionary, but still today hold so much relevance. And so for us, this felt like a great moment to pause and to reflect on Freire's legacy, on particularly his contribution to critical thought, to critical education, to decolonizing education and pedagogy, but also to this notion of humanizing education. He said to transform the world is to humanize it. And so it's in that spirit that we've gathered here 2 nights in a row to reflect on those legacies, but also particularly its relevance today. So for those of you who are able to join us last night, we heard from filmmaker, I'm looking for her so she can, there we go, Catherine Murphy, who shared a clip from a film about Freire, and we were able to see Freire in action in some ways and really felt like we were in that room. And Catherine, thank you so much for sharing the context of the film and kind of what Freire had to offer. We also heard from Dr. Florada, Alma Florada, about the legacy of Freire as kind of narrated and shared by her students. And then we also heard from a professor in the School of Education today, Patrick Kamangyan, who talked about how Freire's work impacted and continues to impact his work in humanizing education, in teacher education, at the level of kind of the district, the school district, and the classroom, and so on. So that conversation continues this evening, and with that context, I again want to welcome all of you. Tonight's conversation is more of a community gathering where everyone is welcome to participate. We're hoping that we can share more stories in terms of Freire's impact on your work or on your philosophy or approach. And the one thing is, we do want to record this session. So, as you share your piece, if you feel uncomfortable being recorded, please send us a little chat and we'll take that into consideration. But the spirit with which we want to record is to make sure we have it for our own archives. Maybe, thinking about the future, the students and faculty members who may celebrate the bicentenary, or in another 100 years perhaps. And we want this to be a part of our archives, but we also would like to share on through our social media channels and so on. So we're holding both this fact that we're inviting you to share your stories, and the fact that we also want to share this kind of memorable moment with everyone. So please feel free to either have your video off, or let us know, and we can accommodate your specific needs as well. I also want to take a moment this evening just for gratitude. Again, gratitude to the School of Education community, USF School of Education faculty, staff, students, who continue to really commit to the advancement of justice through education. We say that is our mission. This School of Education has never been shy about delving right into both the tensions and the possibilities in that connection between education and justice or injustice. And so that's the work that continues. So we are extremely grateful to this community. Also gratitude to all of you, our collaborators, our former students, former faculty members, all those connected in different ways to our School of Education. We always say that, it really takes a large, full, whole, beautiful community to carry on this work. And we really feel like we're in that presence this evening. And of course, I want to take a moment also to appreciate the fact that we get to do all of this work on this particular in this particular space and on this land. And to that, I would like to read a segment of the Land Acknowledgement that's been put together by our USF Faculty Association. The University of San Francisco resides on the traditional homelands of the Ramaytush Ohlone tribal nation. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced removal from this territory, and we celebrate the public presence of Ohlone descendants who are working today to preserve and nourish their indigenous identity. So welcome again, everyone, on behalf of the USF School of Education, and particularly our organizing entity, which is the Center for Humanizing Education and Research, which really seeks to provide these types of spaces where we can come together, tell stories, learn from each other, and continue to expand this community of people who are generating new knowledge to transform society. So welcome again. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to the chair of our International and Multicultural Education Department, Dr. Emma Fuentes.
Thank you so much, Dean Koirala-Azad. Welcome to see, wonderful to see you all, and welcome back into this space, those of you who were with us last night and able to be here today in this less formal, more generative conversation dialogue space. I get the honor to talk a teeny bit about the Paolo Freire scholarship that was started by a group of alumni and Doctora Alma Florada. And one of the beautiful parts of being a professor in the School of Education, and specifically in IME, is that we inherited this rich legacy that is rooted in Freirean thought. And even without explicit conversations with the former faculty or with the founding faculty, the rooted nature of Freirean thought in everything we do is always there. And we're always so surprised and happy with that reality, that it's so infused into our curriculum, into our pedagogical style. And one thing where we really see this sort of merging of praxis and critical consciousness and humanizing is in the communities that are established between the faculty, not just communities, but the relationships between faculty, between students, and between current students and past students. And one beautiful legacy of our past students or our alumni was that they came together, like I mentioned with Doctora Alma Florada, and created a social justice, Paulo Freire scholarship in his legacy that would not benefit just them, but it's something that to pay it forward and to contribute and to carry on this legacy by supporting IME students that came in way after them that are continuing the work of Freirean futures, as we talked about last night, sort of extending Freirean thought into these new, exciting, nuanced terrains that we're seeing today. So in the scholarship was founded almost 2 decades ago and was finally not endowed, but it had enough so that we could start actually gifting it in 2017. We've been able to gift 3 wonderful students doing incredible work since 2017. And you'll see on this slide, it gives a little bit about who they are. Justine Santos, Pamela Ortiz Cerda, and Jean-Pierre are all wonderful, amazing parts of our community that we're so proud of. And we were so happy to be able to not only support them in their work with us, but to recognize the links between Freide and the work that they're doing. So we wanted to do a shout out to the students that have received this scholarship, to the alumni that established this, and also to all of the people that have donated to the scholarship over the years. We do not have a slide with a big enough space to capture all of the names, but we really are so appreciative of all the people that have donated. And we are going to post the link in the chat. And if you want to share about the story of the scholarship or contribute to the scholarship to support future students' work, please feel free. And with that, I get to pass on the baton to one of the students' alumni that was an important part of creating this social justice scholarship, and that's Peter Baird.
Hello. Am I on? I guess I am. Thank you. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Monisha. This has been an amazing experience so far. And I want to thank Monisha and Alma Florada and everyone for inviting me to share a little song today. This is the song called O Paulo Freire. And hopefully by the end of, in a few minutes, you will all know this song as well. I graduated from IME in 2001. That was my cohort. We were the last cohort to receive the Title VII Bilingual Education Scholarship. I was a 3rd grade teacher in the San Joaquin Valley. I wouldn't have been able to afford to come to IME. So we were pretty aware that we had a legacy to give back and to continue. So that's when we started it. That's when the song dates to 2003 when we first came up with the idea and started working on it. And as you said, it took a lot of years to get it funded. We had to raise enough money and we had to get the folks in the fundraising department to pay enough attention to us that they started putting out publicity about it. So Susan Katz, I see you there. You were very significant in putting some of that pressure on. And so that cohort included a lot of people. Nancy Jean Smith went before me, but was responsible for me being there. And we talked about Susan and Dick and Rosa and Edgar. So it's great to see all of you people tonight. I first heard about Paulo Freire as a freshman in college in 1968. I was part of a small seminar with John McFadden, who had studied with Illich in Cuernavaca at the CDOC Center. And Freire came and he talked about the literacy campaigns at that time. So the tune of this song comes from a wonderful Brazilian musician whose name is Dorival Caymmi. And if you don't know Caymmi, look him up on YouTube. The song that this is taken from is called O Canoeiro. And I've tried to follow it fairly, fairly truthfully and stuff. The last thing I'll say is that I'm a song singer, but a song leader. And that's my real passion, is to get people to sing. So as the words come up, and they're going to be, the English words are on here, mute yourself, but do sing along, okay? I'm going to be watching and making sure that you all do sing along. We'll sing the English words. There are words in Spanish. It's a working translation. And thanks to Denia Almaflorada's daughter-in-law, we have a translation in Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese as well. So here's the song, and O Paulo Freire, and do sing along. There's the right key. Oh, Paulo Freire was a revolutionary Brazilian. Paulo Freire is a teacher today. Oh, Paulo Freire was a revolutionary Brazilian. Paulo Freire is a teacher today. When we teach about justice, when we teach about love, Paulo Freire is alive today. When we teach about justice, when we teach about love, Paulo Freire is alive today. When we teach about justice, when we teach about love, Paulo Freire is alive today. Oh, Paulo Freire was a revolutionary Brazilian. Paulo Freire is a teacher today. Oh, Paulo Freire was a revolutionary Brazilian. Paulo Freire is a teacher today. When students learn to read, and they read the world, Paulo Freire is alive today. When students read and they read the world, Paulo Freire is alive today. When students learn to read and they read the world, Paulo Freire is alive today. Are you singing with me? Oh, Paulo Freire was a revolutionary Brazilian. Paulo Freire is a teacher today. Oh, Paulo Freire was a revolutionary Brazilian. Paulo Freire is a teacher today. When we challenge the system, when we challenge ourselves, Paulo Freire is alive today. When we challenge the system, when we challenge ourselves, Paulo Freire is alive today. When we challenge the system, when we challenge ourselves, Paulo Freire is alive today. Oh, Paolo, everybody, Paulo Freire was a revolutionary Brazil. Paulo Freire is a teacher today. Oh, Paulo Freire was a revolutionary Brazilian. Paulo Freire is a teacher today. When we come together, share our voices ever, Paulo Freire is alive today. When we come together, showing our choices ever, Paulo Freire is alive today. When we come together, join our voices ever, Paulo Freire is alive today. Ultima, last time. Oh, Paulo Freire was a revolutionary Brazil. Paulo Freire is a teacher today. Oh, Paulo Freire was a revolutionary Brazilian. Paulo Freire is a teacher today. Paulo Freire is alive today. Paulo Freire es maestra hoy. Paulo Freire e hoje é professor.
Thank you so much, Peter. That was amazing. And what a great way to lift all our spirits. We're ready to go uh, with the sharing. So the rest of the time really is for us to share stories, inspirations. And so I'm going to invite Dr. Alma Florada to share some of her um, maybe memories. And after that, our faculty member, Dr. Susan Katz, who many of you here know and have known for a long time. Dr. Katz, in many ways, for those of us who came to the school later, was that bridge between all these beautiful legacies and memories, and kind of bringing those of us who are new into the fold with all these wonderful legacies. And so uh, we have Dr. Katz, and after that, really anyone who'd like to share, please feel free to put your the kind of Zoom raise hand icon up, and I'll try my best to facilitate so everyone who would like to share gets to share this evening. And if you prefer, just please let us know in chat and we'll monitor that as well. So, Dr. Alma Florada.
Thank you so much. I won't take a long time because I already had an opportunity to speak yesterday, and I'm certainly anxious to hear from the students. I'm very happy that you mentioned Susan Katz because she really came into the program with very clear understanding of the same philosophy that we were espousing, and she carried it on. I think that because the program was founded and all the faculty that joined it the same year, we all ended up retiring almost at the same time. So Susan was left with the with the need to take by herself the program and continue carrying it. And of course, then she was able to be joined by you and all of you that are the present faculty. Some former graduates like Dr. Jacqueline Reza, Dr. Beth Van Hoek, and Dr. Marla Lowenthal always have remained at US, and also Sadiq Papal were graduates that continue being adjuncts and maintaining some of the past experiences. I would have many personal anecdotes to tell about Paolo, but I'd like to take a minute to talk about both Elsa and Nita Freire. Elsa was his wife of many years, and I got to meet her at Stanford when Paulo came to give that seminar, and she would be sitting quietly in one corner of the room. And of course, I gravitated to be with her during all the breaks. And two Latin American women, both mothers, actually they had their younger son with them, and my daughter got to meet him, and there was a beautiful connection that was made there. And then when Elsa passed away, it was a very difficult time for Paolo, very, very difficult. He did not want to travel by himself anymore, and his daughter Madalena came with him to a couple of the presentations that he did. I remember very clearly one week-long seminar in Irvine. There was something interesting that happened at one point that Madalena was supposed to be the keynote at a conference, and she couldn't make it at the last minute. So all of a sudden they were announcing Madalena Freide and asking me to stand up and speak, impersonating in a way Paulo's daughter. Then I got to meet Nita Freide, and it was extraordinary because she gave Paolo a whole new life, spirit, energy, enthusiasm, and it was beautiful to see them interacting. And I was privileged to visit them in Brazil, and we spent time going together to take flowers to Elsa's tomb and the cemetery, but also visiting different aspects of and places of Sao Paulo. Nita was a great collector of folklore, folkloric beautiful things from Brazil, and we developed also a very nice friendship. And I think that she has been extraordinarily thankful to Peter and everyone who work on developing the Paulo Freire scholarship, because it was the best thing she felt that anyone could do for Paulo, more than any recognition of him personally, you know, with plaques and different things that people do to honor someone, to honor him by helping students be able to learn his thoughts. So with this, I thank you all again very much for having acknowledged this centennial, for having brought us together yesterday. There were several students from years past, which I have not been in close contact with for a while, and which now I hope to continue being in contact with. And many of the more recent graduates were also there last night when I got this chat. I was able to highlight all those very loved names for me. Every one of them has a piece of my heart. So thank you again, and very anxiously wanting to hear from the graduates.
Do you want me to just go? Or you?
Sure, Dr. Katz.
I could say so much, and I want to be very brief to give space for all of you to speak. But let me just start by saying Paulo Freire brought me to USF literally and figuratively, because when he came to campus, I guess it was 1983, that was the first time I ever stepped foot at the campus of USF. I came to hear him, and I remember him speaking in the chapel, and I remember it was completely packed. And at that time of my life, it was a really pivotal time where I was moving from full-time political activism and community organizing into teaching. So to hear him speak and to have a frame for what I wanted to bring to my teaching, what I taught in middle school, critical literacy. And to know that at the time I was doing a lot of work against US intervention in Central America, and was very inspired by the Sandinista revolution, and which used, I mean, the way that education happened and the way the revolution was able to be built and shared was through literacy campaigns inspired by Paulo Freire. So it was, it just felt like that moment, I remember it so well, and it just seems very transformative. I never had any idea that USF was going to end up being such a big part of my life. So fast forward 1996, a colleague, Maria Frankis, who some of you know, told me, she said, Alma Ferrata is looking for someone to work with at USF. Like, I didn't know anything about USF. I knew a lot about Alma Ferrata. And it turned out it was position in teacher ed, not IME. But Alma, I remember looking for you at my interview. I was always looking for you. And you were, you know, I felt like I was one of your advisees. You were such an incredible mentor for me. And the way you invited me to be the third reader on all your students' dissertations. There are people here today. I was as a third reader. And what blew me away was the way, the example that you set in terms of your classes, and particularly a dissertation defenses. I mean, that dissertation defense can be the most rigid white supremacist kind of ritual. Well, not with you. I mean, with you, a dissertation defense was a community celebration. People brought their loved ones. There were altars. There was food. Like, it was just such a beautiful, joyful experience. So I think what you created was such a counter-hegemonic kind of way of being in academia. And I was looking over Pedagogy of the Oppressed today and the commentary by Valerie Kinlock, and she was asked, what do you think a Freirean university would look like today? And she says, I think it would include open spaces for people to engage with others, to analyze events going on in the world, to examine ways to combat oppression and inequity, to dismantle racism, classism, sexism, inequality, and capitalism. It would be free. And with the Title VII fellowships that you procured for students, it was free. It says open to everyone. And I know that was your philosophy, like anyone who wanted to be a doctorate, people who were committed to their communities, come to USF, we'll nurture you, we'll guide you. And it said it would be guided by the need to create and enhance our stances, dispositions, and ideologies related to critical consciousness, collaborating with others, working for necessary social political change, and thinking beyond the self. It would be a humanizing, culturally rich academic space. And that's what you created. That's what I saw. And so when you were nearing retirement and you said to me, Susan, by then I was IME, and you said, I'm passing the baton, carry on the torch, like, oh, whoa, that is a huge responsibility. And let me say, no way did I ever do that alone. Very soon after, our first hire in IME was Shabnam. Our second hire in IME was Emma. Third, Monisha. Fourth, Rosa Jimenez. Fifth, Colette Camp. So, what a team we've been able to pull together to carry out your legacy, Freudian legacy. So I am just so always eternally grateful to you. So it's very emotional to be here with you tonight, especially as I near my own retirement. So it feels like very full circle, but thank you. You are just, you and he are always present with us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Katz. And we are the beneficiaries of all you've done and your legacy in the School of Ed as well. So thank you for sharing those meaningful words. I'm wondering if anyone else would, yes, Dr. Bev Hawk. You're still muted. There we go.
Okay, there. Now, okay.
It works.
Okay, well, I was lucky enough to get to teach at USF, and I was lucky enough to be the director of Reading the World, which I discovered had quite an impact. For many years, I have taken people on trips throughout the world, all over the world, to meet with authors and illustrators of children's books. And about 10 years ago, I was in the Ukraine. I was in a children's library in Kiev, and the guy came up to me and said, Igor knows you. Igor? Who is Igor? And she points out this very tall, skinny man who I had no idea. I didn't recognize him at all. And she said to me, he knows you from Reading the World. And he had been at one of our conferences. He had been a member of the International Children's Digital Library. He had been on a panel. He did not speak English, but he came running over to me and he picked me up and he swung me around, very excited. I thought it was crazy because I had gray hair by then, and how he recognized me, but he said he recognized my voice. But I just used that as an example of, well, people said, we can't take you anywhere. And that was kind of true with Reading the World, because wherever I went, abroad or in this country, I ran into people who had been to Reading the World and felt it had impacted their lives. And of course, Paulo Freire's teachings had impacted their life. Igor was quite a surprise. Okay.
Folks, this is an evening for sharing. Please don't be shy. Any ways in which you've been influenced by Freire, or even recently with just the conversation that's happening. And yes, please feel free to unmute yourselves and share.
Rosa, can we call on you to jump in? I know you were planning to share tonight.
Oh, I I got roped into this by my mother a little bit, but I just want to say that I am so happy to be here. My mind is a jumble of thoughts, and my heart is a great big smile. I'm just delighted to meet the people who are at USF now. Um, Dr. Fuentes, Dr. Kamangian, I loved your presentation yesterday. Dean Koirala-Azad, I just love your presence and your warmth. Dr. I'm not going to know if I'm going to say your name, Monisha Bajaj, something close. And yeah, it's just amazing because my mom and I were commenting last night that I think USF has become overall a much more progressive place than it used to be, and it's just so wonderful to see that. I mean, it was like before, it was like this little tiny beachhead, and it's grown so much. And reading about or hearing about the work that's been done in terms of the Humanizing education proposals in San Francisco, I mean, that's huge. That's just a huge impact. So I'm delighting in being here and in seeing people I recognize from long ago, Nancy Jean Smith and Joyce Jermaine Watts. And yeah, we're all getting older. I just turned 60, hard to believe. But I think that the greatest sign of success, I was saying this to somebody recently, is being able to, contribute to something that goes on beyond you and goes on and goes on, right? So it's just amazing and delightful to, I had the great honor of introducing Paulo Freide at, I think it may have been a GAVIC conference a long time ago. And I just, the momentum and the ongoingness of all this. Oh, and watching the movie yesterday, Catherine, that was amazing, seeing him in his younger days. And so it's lovely to see the work grow and multiply. And of course, there's always a need for it. It's like, I do think we make a difference in the world. And at the same time, the challenges and things have certainly not gotten smaller. If anything, they've gotten larger. I have a friend who has a saying that he likes to say. He says, everything is getting better and better and worse, faster and faster, all at the same time. And, it really does feel like it. And at the same time, coming together and with people who are really working to make a positive difference in the world is so inspiring and nourishing. So deep bows to all of you and much gratitude.
I can share something if, unless anybody else wants to, because then I could share it later. Anybody else want to jump in? All right, I'll share. So I just saw the text that one of the current IME students, Patricia, wrote in the chat that says Freire's spirit and Dr. Katz brought her to IME. And I was thinking about that Freirian spirit that you're mentioning, Patricia, and reminded me of being a graduate student at UC Berkeley in the Social and Cultural Studies department with Shabnam Koirala-Azad, our dean. And we were in a class on popular education and participatory research. And a lot of that class was rooted in also Freirean thought. And we spent a lot of time, it was a small class, maybe there were like 12 of us. And we sat around, our professor came in and was like, what do you all want to do in this class? And we sat around and we started engaging with these ideas, right? And we also brought ourselves into that room as educators and as organizers, and felt always that academia was not necessarily the only place or the right place for us to be doing our work, right? There was always this tension between where we thought the work could happen and academia. But as we talked, we got really into the idea of the way to mold those things is through participatory action research. And we worked together as a group, and we started a center called Center for Popular Education and Participatory Research, called CPEPR. And it was a center at first that everybody kind of was like, participatory action research is this sort of not legitimate form of qualitative research, and you'll have to combine it with critical ethnography or something like that. It was always like not thought of or even invited as part of sort of the qualitative methodologies. And we worked really hard as students, and we got funding from the Irvine Foundation. And once we did that, UC Berkeley was like, come on in with your CPEPR. And we started a center, and we had conferences that brought together practitioners and scholars and thinkers and organizers from all over the world. And it was just a group of us graduate students that put on these big conferences. And Shabnam, please chime in if I'm missing anything. But all of us went on to do participatory action research as our methodologies for our dissertations. And we all went on to get jobs across the country and are still sort of rooted in everything we do, from our pedagogies to our methodologies, rooted in these humanizing praxis. And now, so that spirit that was rooted in Freirean thought really informed our graduate studies, and then has, like I mentioned earlier, was really already present in USF, not necessarily as people are noting that USF we have seen it gone through and have been participating in the huge transformation that has happened in the School of Education over the last 15, 20 years. But those same spirit of humanizing praxis is what led to these lots of conversations around how do we center the work that we're doing in the School of Ed into a research center. And so in the last few years, we have created the Center for Humanizing Education and Research, which in so many ways I feel is linked to the work that we did in CPEPR and enhanced with the work of Professor Camanyan, who spoke yesterday, and other colleagues in the School of Education that are, like we talked about, also sort of pushing Freirean thought into these Freirean futures. And I love and I'm excited about all of what that can mean too. So thought I'd share that.
Emma, I think you're prompting me to go next. And the reason for that is because my mom's name is Emma, and there's a relevant reason. There's relevance here that I'm going to share. So I'm Joyce Germaine Watts. I don't even know what class. I think, let's see, class of 1980 something. That's what I supposedly graduated. And then by the time I crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's in my revisions, it was a long time later because I was too busy doing the work. But I'm going to try to get through this. Somewhat academically, cerebrally, professionally. Of course, we know the professional is personal and political is personal and all of that. Okay, I really should have typed everything out. Yeah, right. Okay. I'm saying that because I'm going to try to follow my notes and a couple of quotes that I have on my phone, and hopefully it'll all kind of blend together and you'll understand. I'm going to first quote from Freide from Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and it is a sentence that probably speaks to everything that I'd like to share. I'm really going to try to do this in a short period of time. That quote is, founding itself upon love, humility, and faith, dialogue becomes and I missed the word, but a relationship, horizontal relationship, of which mutual trust between the dialoguers is the logical sequence. And maybe that is probably the most unusual description of what's supposed to happen in a school, especially from an educator. Love, humility, and faith. And I'm not even talking about standardized tests or anything like that. I'm simply saying that it's not typically in teacher preparation, that's not typically where you start. So I kind of want to start there. I'm going to echo a few folks. I also, I guess it was around 60 something, like maybe 60, I don't know. At some point, oh no, it was actually 70 something. I had a Chicano studies class at Cal State LA. The professor handed out assignments that we were supposed to read stuff. And I saw this little bitty book. I don't know if I chose it. I think he gave it to me. I'm almost positive. He handed it to me. It's a little bitty book. It's called whatever, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, whatever. I'll do that. It's cool. I'll read that. And it wasn't very thick. So I read it like 2 nights before. And it took me 2 days to get off like the 5th or 10th page. And my original copy is highlighted in, I can see it. First, it has no cover, of course, but it's highlighted in yellow, blue, and pink highlighter. It has pencil writing in the margins. It's got green underline because it took that much to decipher. And I was reared by 2 teachers. So that's going to come up next. And that is where Emma comes in. So my parents, my family moved to Los Angeles from New Orleans when I was 3 months old. And my parents were both highly respected teachers, and they went into the LA Unified School District, and they were sort of appalled. They weren't just appalled with LAUSD. They had to take certain California Constitution courses, et cetera. They were appalled with UCLA. They were appalled with USC because the level of rigor was a joke as far as everything that they had been reared with. That generation of African-American teachers were expected to be liberators of a sort. And you didn't get into the teaching school unless you were clearly committed and deeply invested in the role. So they just couldn't understand that it was a job for a lot of people. So bottom line is, after they had retired, there was an announcement in the LA, little newsletter. And it said that there was a program in multicultural education that was coming to Southern California, although it was based at University of San Francisco. And one day we were driving, and I was mentioning this to them. It's a doctorate in education, and y'all have a lot of free time. What would you think if we 3 enrolled in that program? So Albert R. Germain, Emma T. Germain, and Joyce Germain Watts enrolled in the doctoral program. And that is where we first met Dr. Alma Flor Ada. There is so much to say. It's such a journey since then. I'm going to try to make a few connections, and I'll try to wrap it up. I should say Emma finished first, actually. Joyce finished second, and my dad did all of his coursework, but he was ill by the time he got into the dissertation, and so he really was not able to complete it. But we shifted, the program shifted for 1 semester, I believe it was in LA, and then for reasons not entirely understood to me, it shifted to the campus. And so for the remainder of the time, it was the weekend program, and I think twice a month maybe, and our cohort was either on the road driving up there, or we were flying the flights from Braniff. It was like an extension. It was like $18 from LA to San Francisco. So many times we flew and many times we drove. And there were times when I was going alone, working on the dissertation, didn't want to be bothered with the airports and the rental cars. And I would like want to just go to campus and come back. And that's exactly what I'd do. I'd leave about 3 or 4 a.m. and I'd drive back that night. And it was relaxing, allowed me to do a lot of thinking. And so that's how we got, ultimately up to the campus. I just want to say, I want to build on something that Alma Flor Ada said yesterday. And by the way, I can see you at the dining room table when you came to dinner with my folks. She was saying, Rosalba, and I know you know this, and I know you're tired of that story about your saying to her, where is all of this dialogue between mother and children? And the only thing I think I would say is that even though I had a child at that time, might even have heard that story, Rosalba, I found it difficult to break with the sort of traditional parent role. And I wish I had done more of that. I'm really wondering, where is the school, and maybe you all know, of popular education for parents? Because I think it's crucial. And if I knew better, and I didn't exactly break out of my traditional habits. But I also just wanted to mention really quickly, here in LA, Raul Anjorve with IDEPSCA, the Institute of Popular Education of Southern California, had invited Paulo Freire to LA through Cal State LA, as a matter of fact, earlier. And we spent a week. It's so funny when I think about the 2 days that I was going to whip through this little book and be ready to do my report, which just went like, it was a very bad report in class. But we spent 1 week studying Freire, and then the second week he came and we studied with him, and that was repeated at Stanford with Martin Carnoy, same thing. And so the idea that we need time and space, and we can create these kinds of in time and space where people can invest without necessarily having to enroll, have a very meaningful experience. Obviously, Paolo would not show up, but as we've always already said, there's a lot of Paolo on video that we can debrief. And there are a lot of people who have had, the interactions with him. But the family, I'm sort of speaking on behalf of the family when I say to Dr. Ada that there is no measure, there's no way to measure the impact of your investment in our learning and your introduction for us to Paulo Freire. We'll say a couple of other things really quickly. Paulo Freire and my dad passed away the same year, which was 1997. So that sort of cemented the bond in some way. I want to say also that probably in terms of, when I was working on my dissertation, I was trying to create the methodology, and I really did want it to be liberatory, and I didn't just want to ask people a bunch of questions. And I wanted to use visuals, because I think I'm probably, I would probably now label myself as some sort of a visual, kind of visually oriented. And I remember many, not only from reading of the methodologies, but other examples of where it had been applied. So I was on my way to Brazil to talk with Freire about, to get some feedback. There was no Zoom, right? So had to go there, but it turned out that he was on his way here. And so fortunately, I got to catch up with him at Cornell and have a little conversation, which just simply like, who am I thinking I can just pick up this methodology and use it? But I think it reinforced my confidence. So just a couple of other things that I want to echo about faith, humility. About love, humility, and faith. And I don't think I'm going to be able to pull this up quickly enough. But in Pedagogy of Hope, 2 things. One, the thing that always sticks with me is the idea of critical hope. It's not this mushy thing, It's not like, we're all joyful and hopeful and all. It's critical hope. And I think we need a lot of that right now. It's very troubling to me that some people want to get over it. And if you look at the ads, it is like making me sick, because it's like a year ago, all that had been tamped down. People were, their budgets were tight and all, but now it's like exploding with by this and by that, and how soon can we get back to normal? So critical hope is a different theme. And I want to just say about humility, I'm using hope sort of interchangeably with the idea of faith. And I may not be able to find this, but at the beginning of Pedagogy of Hope, Freire is talking about someone in the audience. I don't know if you all remember this, but he says, I see him standing in one of the aisles of that big auditorium so long ago. His head is erect, his eyes are blazing. He's speaking in a loud, clear voice. And at that point, he says, we've heard all these wonderful things. I guess it was a microphone in the aisle, and so someone is going to speak. And he was very grateful for the things that Paolo Freire had said to him or to the group. And then he had a couple of questions. So he says, we've heard all of this good information. He says, Dr. Freire, and what he asks him in essence is, when have you ever been to where we live? We, the laborers, and I'm not remembering exactly where this conference was taking place, but it's right at the beginning of Pedagogy of Hope. How often do you come to where we are? And it was a moment where, and this is in the book, so clearly Freire's humility was such that he needed people to understand that for however sincere he was, there was a gap between what he was envisioning and what he is. The guy says, and how many children do you have? And Freire says, 5. And he says, so I can kind of see him dropping his head. And he says, how many girls and how many boys? And then this participant goes on to say, and I'm sure you have room for the boys, and you probably have a separate room for the girls. And then you probably have a room for the housekeeper, probably outside of the house. And of course, there's a room for you and Mrs. Freire. And then you probably have a room where you probably study, right? And when you come home and you're tired, the children are all cleaned up and da-da-da-da-da-da. So that humility for him to have felt that, to sort of see himself, I'm going to say in contemporary phrase, as sort of a lifelong learner, and that he would acknowledge it and hopefully allow people to learn from it, to me is really powerful. So it sort of takes me full circle back to love, humility, and faith. The last thing I just want to share, which is probably the highlight for me, our students, they are now probably in their 30s, but at that time they were in high school. 2 situations that I'd like to share. One little detour, one little echo about, let me go with the students and maybe I'll be able to pull up the one little echo. African Youth in Action was an organization that we formed here in LA at the request of students who were Black Student Union presidents in their high schools. And I won't go into all of the details about AYA, but here's the thing. In 1992, civil unrest here caused by the beating of Rodney King, of course, had global reverberations. And you may remember also that there was a scene at an intersection where there's a truck driver who was white. His name was Reginald Denny. And they kept kind of showing Reginald Denny being hit over the head with a fire extinguisher, almost as if to say, violence is everywhere. The violence of the state versus the response of the oppressed. And so the students came to the house and they were furious about the way the community was being characterized because of the beating of Reginald Denny. In Pedagogy of the Oppressed, again, without going into a lot of detail, there's a section that speaks about, which is just logical, that the violence of the oppressed in response to the oppressor may exceed the violent. Otherwise, you don't get out of the situation. If you've got a power over you, if you don't power harder, you'll stay in that situation. And so that was one where they felt, I think I would say, a burned sort of affirmation they felt. And the other thing was that they rejected. They didn't want to hear it. And he said that when the oppressed rise up against the oppressor, since the oppressor can't help themselves, can't get their way out of that because they are in an unloving state, that the act of the oppressed to liberate themselves is an act of love for themselves, and they're helping the oppressor do something the oppressor cannot do for him or herself. And that's kind of loving as well. And the idea that the students are like, love the oppressor? Are you kidding me? They couldn't see love in the liberation as such. I mean, they could, but it was counterintuitive. So the last two things I just want to read are outside of the US. One has to do with Nicaragua, thanks to Alma Flor.
And if I might just quickly interject, I know we have a few other people who are ready to share as well. So thank you.
Okay, then I won't mention Nicaragua. I will mention Freire's powerful encounter with the African continent. As a member of the World Council of Churches, Freire was mainly involved in the realities of Portuguese-speaking countries. A lot of people don't know this. Angola, Cape Verde, and to a great extent, Guinea-Bissau. He was also in contact with Gabon, Tanzania, Kenya, Senegal, Botswana, and Zambia. This is what Vivian Valerio, a researcher on African and racial issues, linked to the World Political Economy Program at the Federal University of ABC. That's what she explains. And so I would hope that in the future we do more to bring to people's attention the work of Paulo Freire on the African continent. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Joyce. I'm still smiling thinking of your whole family involved in this, you know, in the education effort. Thank you for sharing those beautiful stories. And I know that Arturo Cortes, where is Arturo, who has been a long time member of the USF School of Education in various ways. Welcome, Arturo. So good to see you. Was also going to share some reflections and insights. So
Thank
please.
you. Thank you so much, Shabnam. I appreciate that. So my name is Arturo Cortes. I'm an assistant professor at CU Boulder. Really excited to be here. You know, one of the first times I held a Freire text, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, was in 2002 at a class that I took at USF in the Center for Teaching Excellence and Social Justice. That was where I got my teaching credential. And I remember the text being so hard to understand. And this was a text, I mean, many of you probably had this experience too, either now or in the past, where you stumble over every word. And the class that we were reading this text was with Herb Cole, of course, who was instrumental in starting the center at USF, where you know, the main goal of the center, at least how I understand it, is that we were really intentionally designing a new learning ecology to bring together Black and Brown teachers, a variety of different teachers to diversify the teaching force. And here we were, you know, this new group of teachers endowed with this notion that we could change the world, and we could not get through the first text. And there was an uproar in the first class because, you know, as I said, we couldn't get to the first page. And what followed, you know, from this dilemma is that we started to read it together in the class. We started to read through the first chapter together. Isn't that Freire's invitation? That we learn as a collective. We build together. And I remember almost every single class that I took at USF with Susan, Emma, Shabnam, Herb, this text was brought up, or even another one of Freire's text. We learn something new every single time we've cracked that book open, or even any one of the other books. And so when I went on to graduate school at Berkeley, I deepened my relationship with Freire and to work with the communities and the students that I continue to work with. And what I learned is that Freire can open up so much when we summon him and put him into conversation with others. Like Vygotsky, as my mentor, Dr. Chris Gutierrez, opened up for me. And so I love this idea of thinking about what happens when we bring these ideas together. What can we build? And for me, that's building and living with his theory. And so I appreciated what the previous speaker said, you know, like what happens when we think about Freire in conversation in different spaces, in different localities, in different times. One of my colleagues here at Boulder, Dr. Kolonji Nzinga, is thinking about Freire in conversation with Fanon. And that's really fascinating. What does that open up? So for me, learning through dialogue toward the future, horizontality, dialogism in the future, what can we do when we create new types of relationships that are yearning for something new, yearning for a new future? And I think that's the spirit of what I entered into at the center at USF. and that I continue to do in my work with my communities now. So I'm really curious about how this invitation that we've kind of been summoned here today is, what does it mean to breathe life, to continue to breathe life into Freire's theories? Conscientização is the lifelong endeavor. The mind, our relationships, our bodies, indeed sociality are always under threat. And I think it's important that we must endeavor to animate his theories, these ideals, and our everyday interactions and make them our own. So thank you so much for giving me this time. I have a lot of respect and love for so many people in this room. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arturo. That's beautiful. And yes, the Freudian futures or the evolution of thought is definitely has been a theme and one for us all to kind of reflect deeply on, and that sense of being in conversation, bringing these great thinkers into conversation. Thank you. That was beautiful. Let's see.
Last night we had wanted Micaela to share, and Catherine, you were going to maybe share that map. Is that something that you all would like to do?
It would be really wonderful. I have the map up. It would be really wonderful to hear from Micaela, however briefly. Micaela, everyone, todos se quedaron con las ganas de escucharte hablar anoche. And I can share. Let's see if Micaela comes on, if she's still here. Maybe I can also send her another note, but let me get that map up. And wow, we shared one of her maps last night, and I'll share another one right now. Share screen. So here we go. So Micaela Ovelar led the research team that for the Ellas Frangicos film that you saw a fragment of last night, and we're going on to make a feature-length film that will look much more in depth at the work that Freire was doing before the coup d'etat in Brazil, you know, the early work, the on the ground work, the in the trenches work of liberation literacy, and we'll talk a little bit more about the context, what was happening in Brazil at the time with the Ligas Camponesas, the peasant leagues, and then a little bit about, you know, this legacy and how Freire carried this work and this legacy through his life. So Micaela put together this map, and every red dot, can you all see it now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Every red dot is a location where there's documented, where Freire had a documented presence. And so it's just amazing in one human life to have traveled to so many places. So, and really engaged with educators, philosophers, organizers, justice workers, et cetera, doing a whole range. So, you know, the work in Guinea-Bissau, the work in Angola, the work in Nicaragua in 1980 with the Sandinista literacy campaign that a couple of people this evening have mentioned. And then, of course, the amazing work that he did after returning to Brazil after 16 years of exile. But also this rather untold chapter of all of his work and influence in the United States. And part of what we've been trying to do, so this is a picture of Micaela. Hopefully she'll jump on when I'm done and I'll be quick, but this is Micaela here on the top right, presenting on this research. But one of the things we're finding is that that there's not a whole lot documented about Freire's work in the United States. I'm sure there are many, many dissertations, but it's like there's not as much as we thought. And we're starting to dig it out and contact people. And I'm starting to get tapes mailed to me here, different strange formats of 1/4-inch tapes that are this big, and this reel-to-reel I got last week that we're trying to digitize. But we also were trying to reach out to the people at UCLA and not getting answers. So there's a whole generation, I think, of people who worked, like Dr. Alma Florada, who worked directly with Freire, who have now, and Herb Cole and others who've now retired and maybe don't have their academic emails. So I would really love if any of you are in touch with any of the people who work directly with Freire, and or if you worked yourself and have stories you want to share, photos, writings, notes, documents. We would love to hear those stories, to collect them, to record them. So I didn't know until last night that Martin Carnoy had brought Freire to Stanford. Wow. So there's this sort of collective knowledge that we'd like to help keep alive. So, and I think sort of crowdsourcing that is a big part of what we can do here. So sharing this map and asking you all, I'll drop our email again in the chat, and would just really love to be in touch with all of you that have collective knowledge or personal knowledge about this Freirean legacy and the legacy of Alma Florada and what UCSF has done. So I'm going to unshare here and hope that Micaela is hearing us and jumps on. Dios mío, ¿cómo hago para terminar? It's like new share. Can I stop? Stop share. There we go. Sorry, it was being covered.
Hola, buenas noches. ¿Cómo están todos, todas? Ahí Patricia se ofreció a hacer la interpretación, así que genial. Si se puede hacer, buenísimo.
Y
Bueno,
claro
nada,
que sí, con mucho gusto.
sí, además sé que hay una parte muy importante que entiende perfectamente castellano, así que genial. Pero igual es para el resto.
Ok, si me espera, si me espera Micaela, interpreto lo que acaba de decir. So Micaela is asking for interpretation. Her English is not that strong. I will be interpreting for her. She wants to make sure that her message is transmitted clearly to everyone. Ahora sí puede pasar, Micaela.
Gracias, Patricia. Bueno, nada, estuve escuchando las participaciones de cada una y cada uno de ustedes, de verdad muy emocionante, y bueno, creo que lo que tenemos en común es que todos estamos atravesadas por la vida y la obra de Paulo Freire, sea que recién lo encontramos a la vuelta de la esquina o que llevamos tiempo en el camino de Freire.
I've been listening to everyone's participation and shares around their experiences with Freire, and it makes me very emotional to hear how we have all been touched in our lives by Freire.
Luego sobre el mapa de Freire, contar que bueno, que en lo personal fue una sorpresa, porque si bien sabía que Freire había viajado, había estado en muchos países, nunca imaginé que hubiera estado en tantos. Prácticamente se recorrió el mundo, ¿no? Entonces eso me sorprendió.
Working on Freire's map, it was very surprising to see, even though I knew he had been in many places, it was very surprising to see his presence around the world.
Luego, lugares tan recónditos, ¿no? Islas pequeñas, y bueno, y también tantos lugares que conoció en primera persona de América Latina y el tiempo que estuvo en Europa, y por supuesto su amor por Brasil y por África también, algo que a él también lo marcó significativamente.
He was in so many faraway places, small islands, Latin America, of course, his love of Brazil and Africa.
Y bueno, repitiendo o reiterando lo que comentaba Catherine, por supuesto, toda aquella persona que sepa o que haya estudiado o que tenga algún material sobre los viajes de Freire, sus experiencias, o que tenga información que quiera compartir con nosotras, súper encantadas. Es fantástico seguir conociendo de Freire. Además es algo que, como ya todos sabrán, es imposible saber todo de Freire, porque fue una persona que no solamente recorrió el mundo, probablemente varias veces, sino que en cada lugar donde iba hacía demasiadas cosas, o sea, entregaba su vida y bueno, es difícil. Yo creo que incluso para la familia de Freire, ni la familia de Freire debe saber todo lo que Freire hizo en sus viajes por el mundo.
Yeah, and to extend the invitation for anyone who knows or worked with Freire or has stories to participate in the project. His reach was far and wide around the world, and it's very special to know about his stories. Even not even his family may know how many places he went to and how much he did and accomplished.
Así que bueno, muchísimas gracias por permitirme compartir estas pequeñas cosas con ustedes, que al mismo tiempo son grandes y emotivas cosas para todas y todos aquí. Así que abrazos, mucho amor, cariño y buenas noches. Gracias.
Yeah, thank you everyone for allowing me to share these few words here, and all this love and care and big hugs and love to everyone.
Gracias, Patricia.
Con mucho gusto.
Wow. Thank you, Micaela and Patricia, for translating. Thank you for those beautiful words. It's I saw lots of hearts around the room. Very, very moving. So, folks, we're slowly coming towards the end of the program, but I was wondering, Dr. Bajaj will share some insights from her research as well. And before that, not to put anyone on the spot, but our wonderful collaborator from Chapman University, Charlotte Evanson, we just came out with this book, Freudian Echoes, and seems so relevant, and I cannot wait to get a copy of the book and to read it. But Charlotte, I wonder if I could invite you to just share a little bit about kind of your book and the work there. That would be wonderful.
Thank you, Dean Azad. I feel so honored and privileged to be here. I was so inspired yesterday by the film and by Catherine and the words of calling us to looking at our intersectionalities and collectivizing around that. So I'll share just a little bit. We have a book, it's an edited book pulling together Freirean scholars, just a few people who are featured. Peter McLaren, we have Tom Wilson, oh, there's so many. There's Nita Muniz, Nita Freire, and it was born out of a conference at Chapman University commemorating the time and the partnerships and conversations he had there. And Nita Freire was able to come and speak at this conference. I was a graduate student at the moment. I did not know much about Freire. I knew a lot about leaning into anti-colonial work and working with students and really centering the voices of students and the experiences. And so I got to learn about this entire world and the connections with the continent and the studies in Africa. I'm from Kenya. And so I was very excited about this and really moved. So born from that, we took some of those proceedings and looked at how do we create a dialogical space within text so that scholars intergenerationally can begin to have these conversations. And so Freirean Echoes is really about that process of positioning scholars and community activists a little bit. And Dr. Kamanyan actually wrote a blurb for us, so we're so thankful, and we're thankful for the work here. And so Thank you for the time. Thank you for creating and cultivating this space and all of the dreams and legacies and actions that will come from it. So it should be out soon, I think at the end of this month. Thank you.
Wonderful. We're going to put a link to the book in the chat as well, because it's definitely, I'm there. It sounds amazing. Thank you so much. And this is the beauty of our work in the School of Education, is we get to collaborate with amazing individuals like yourself. So thank you. Let's see. I believe Nancy Jean, you were going to share some thoughts as well.
Yeah, I would. So I turned 65 this year. I'm retired. I graduated in 95. And I moved to Chiapas, Mexico in 1979. And at that time, I was 26 years old, and I was exposed to some Canadian teachers that had a Freirean school in Tuxtla Gutierrez. And that was my first exposure to Paulo. And I'd like to say that I have so many things. My heart's really full hearing all of everybody and seeing that the work is continuing. I graduated in 95. I think I said that. But I think there's two kinds of people. One person is drawn to Paulo's work because it speaks to them and it fills maybe a void. It supports them. It helps to continue a struggle they've already taken on. And then another person is there learning and they're waking up, right? I think I was a former person. And when I came to Ama Flor, I was drawn to her and I had no idea. But I was so drawn to her. I was looking for her everywhere, this Alma Florada person. I don't know. I got to find her. I got to hear her. And the first time I heard her speak was at a conference in, I don't know what year was Desert Storm. And it was at Cave. And I went there because I wanted to become a doctoral student with her. And I paid for the conference. I got up there and Paolo wasn't there, but this Alma Flor was there, and she got up and she spoke, and it was the first time she spoke, and I just sat there and I thought, this is the person that I want to learn from. This is her. And Alma Flor, you know how much I love you, and everyone else that has been part of this journey, of our journey to make a better world, and whether we're drawn to it or whether we are learning how to walk that walk, which we all have to learn anyway. But so my thoughts for Paolo were of gratitude, just tremendous gratitude to him. And I have to say, we're all doing in some way our own piece, our own projects. And throughout my work, whether it was part of the dissertation, whether it's part of projects that were connected to doctoral study work, or whether it was connecting like to Kristen Brown and her dissertation, and then my dissertation being a spinoff from her dissertation, and then Peggy Laughlin's dissertation being a spinoff from our dissertation. So there's just this work that just continues to go on. And I find that I've gone into the world of Bikram yoga. I'm a Bikram yoga teacher now. And everything that I've done up to this point, anywhere in the world, internationally, now I brought, through Bikram yoga, I brought Paulo Freire's work. I don't always talk about it, but it's still there. And it's really profound, the collective that building community has done. So this is what I wanted to say. Alma Flor read part of it last night, but when she asked us to write something, what came to me was, I wish I could speak to him again. And so I took this opportunity to speak to him. And I started it out by telling him, I now live in Michigan, northern Michigan. I live in the Manistee Huron National Forest in the middle of nowhere. And I appreciate that because it's helped me to center myself in so many ways and to work to make my work even more positive. And so I started out to Casa in Michigan because that's it. Where I have to say a lot of people from around the world have come and found, I believe Paolo is alive in this house. If that sounds weird, I don't. Anyway, dearest Paolo, as always, my first words to you are in gratitude, gratitude for all that you taught us, especially gratitude for the example you showed us for how to live a life of service. Service is never the easy path, but it is the path to both self-liberation and a wider path that opens greater possibilities for others, because that's what we're about, right? It was my great fortune to have learned directly from you and to feel the care and love that you hold out. We're now living in dangerous, this is the part I think Alma Flor read last night, we're now living in dangerous and difficult times, extreme times, times that you would recognize. The monster has not really changed, it takes new forms, and that cruelty remains our collective nemesis. But we have your examples, your language, your clarity to guide us. Were it not for these, I would despair, but I don't. I know that your work is connected to a greater stream of critical consciousness that is now guiding so many of us on this planet. We are not alone. You are still with us, and albeit not in the physical form, I know you are present. I see your values, your work, and your thought all around me, and I know you are smiling on the good work being done by all of us in whatever way we're doing it, right? Today, many times I see your thoughts in action and verbiage. It's often not wrapped up in the same words you use, but it is here still. You're here when we are pushed to rethink language. You're here when we are pushed to rethink how to reach others whose hearts are closed. Here in young teachers struggling to create a better world for their students, and parents wishing to help their children be more fully human in their interactions with others, themselves, and the planet. You're here when so many are muddling about, searching for ways to keep democracy alive, and just muddling about trying to find their way. But finally, you're here guiding us to not despair. And that's probably the biggest message, right? We're not alone. None of us are alone. Guiding us to take action and keep a vision for a better world. And above all, you are here keeping us united in the most critical of ways, that of critical consciousness. For consciousness is all that we are. A critical consciousness is our most powerful and profound tool to help educate the hearts and minds of others. Your life was a gift I am most grateful to have been given freely. You have guided my work and my personal life, and for that I'm most grateful. Your work is committed, so my work now is committed through yoga, but that's still education. It's very much education. So I signed it, your little sister. So thank you. And I'm glad to see all of you. I miss my USF community.
We are here. The extended USF community is always here. Thank you so much, Nancy Jean. Next up, Dr. Bajaj, and then we'll wrap up the program for this evening.
Thank you, Shabnam. I was just going to share that I was supposed to meet Paulo Freire in 1997, and he passed away just before that was going to happen. He was going to be a visiting scholar in the center where I was working as an undergrad. It was my job. So I didn't get a chance to meet him in person. And I encountered his work. Obviously I knew about it, but I think I really delved deep into pedagogy of the oppressed when I was working in my first job after college at a human rights organization. And the way, human rights work is really important. It tends to be dominated by the legal approaches. And when you're, an entry-level person in these organizations, the least sort of considered important work is actually dialoguing with the victims of abuses, because the higher ups are in front of international courts and in the press and being interviewed by the New York Times. So every day I was on the phone with victims of torture, abuse, human rights situations. I remember it clearly, this woman who had been tortured by the Fujimori regime in Peru, and I was on the phone with her very often. And at the same time, my friend had said, let's read Pedagogy of the Oppressed and take walks together after work. And so I was doing this job in the day, interfacing with human rights victims, and then reading Pedagogy of the Oppressed and talking about it with my good friend after work. And at that time, I got really interested in the nexus of education for liberation and the human rights framework. And I learned about the kind of emerging framework of human rights education at that time, and how it could be a transformative sort of, what transformative visions could infuse those dialogues around human rights education. And that's, animated a lot of my work over the last, 25 years. And I did research in India with organizations that were using social justice pedagogies, Freirean pedagogies. And I wanted to just show this image of organizations that were working with Dalit, which formerly called untouchable communities, to empower youth. And you can see in this image, they had posters in every school with Freire's image and quotes, and this is in the Tamil language. They had them in 18 different states in the different regional languages. And then you see a group of teachers at a training underneath a poster of Freire. They're sitting in a circle. Very unusual for the South Asian context to see teachers sitting in a circle on the floor, engaging with each other. So this is Freirean pedagogy in India, in Southern India, in this case, working to think about how education could be a force. In this case, human rights education programs for Dalit youth, trying to empower students to claim their rights and know about them through this very humanizing pedagogy that was happening. And then further research as well. I had a book that was co-authored that came out earlier this year that looks at Freire's problem tree, and we complement that with the idea of a possibility tree and provide a framework for how that could be used as a tool for thinking about humanizing possibilities in education for peace and human rights. So I wanted to share that and just share that I'm so inspired by these 2 evenings, and it's just been such an honor to be in space with all of you. So thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here with us and to be in community, to share Freire's past, present, Freirean futures that we're imagining and building upon. So just a word of thanks.
Yes, and thank you, Dr. Bajaj, who's really, was instrumental in bringing us all together. So that was wonderful to see a picture there as well of your work and how it extends Freirean thought as well. So folks, we've been together 2 nights in a row. We're really going to miss each other tomorrow night. It feels like we might just need to get together anyway. But thank you all, echoing Dr. Bajaj. Thank you so much for being with us. Last night was a little bit more structured. We heard, some great speakers. We were very inspired. And then today, similarly, in a more informal space, able to hear all the ways in which, Freire's work has inspired our work, and then continuing to think into the future about how we bring Freire in conversation with all the urgent issues of our time and the great thinkers of our time. And that includes, of course, everyone who's here. So a great way to end these 2 days. And as you may recall, yesterday we started the event with one of our students, IME doctoral student Janise Powell, sharing her brilliant poetry with us. So we felt like the only right way to end is to bring Janise back and to listen to her brilliant and amazing art and creativity as well. So Janise, if I can call on you.
Yes. Okay. Hi, I'm so excited to be back. I loved hearing from everyone tonight about Freire and his legacy, about the legacy of USF, the legacy of the School of Education and its students. And there was so much good stuff that I really enjoyed hearing about. last night, I shared that I choose to call myself a storyteller in all spaces. And I decided to do that because before coming to USF School of Education, I had almost no positive experience in education. I came into this program with so much pain and rage toward the academy, but this program, Freire's impact on USF and the School of Education, it's fantastic students and staff. Shout out to all of y'all. I was so honored and excited to hear about all the work that's going on in the community. And, you know, all of this has really allowed me to begin to heal from the pain of being in an educational system that basically told me, you know, how I had to behave, the words I had to use, the clothes I had to wear to be heard, to be seen. You know, I think back to when I was allowing the academy to define who I was and who I needed to be accepted. But this program, these faculty, US students have encouraged me to define myself, and I choose to define myself as a storyteller because of my people, because of our history, because of my pain, because of the reason why I continue to be a part of the academy, even though it didn't want my most authentic self. And I was thinking about a workshop that I went to the other day, and the introduction question was, how do you honor yourself, your experiences, your story in your research work? And my answer was that I use words that are used by my people, by my communities. I define myself in ways that my community can understand. And I shared a piece with you last night. I'm going to share the same piece because I believe when it comes to stories, there are many different lessons you can learn from the same story. So I'm going to share the piece again. Here we go. When they see us, we are dead, a thing of the past. When we see us, we are living and fighting and dreaming for our ancestors. When we walk forward toward a brighter day. When we move, you feel the power of bodies in unison. When we chant, we share our history that they tried to wipe away. When we yell, you hear the cries of the past and the celebrations of the future. When they hear us, they are frightened. When we speak, we change the world. When we self-identify, we take away their power to box us, to make us a check mark, to erase our history. We are the past and the present, the future and the joy. We are Indigenous, we are Black, we define ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you again, Janise. Thank you all. Please stay in touch. Please be connected to us. We look forward to being in touch as well. Thank you again to the Center for Humanizing Education and Research, School of Ed community, Dr. Bajaj, Jazzmin Gota, our wonderful student, IME student who's been helping make all of this happen behind the scenes, Dr. Fuentes. Thank you all so much. Dr. Alma Florada, thank you again for your presence. We are just thrilled to be in community with all of you. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.